Now, to guide us through this conversation, we have a very able panel. On my exact left, we have His Excellency Malik Samara Wikrama, who's the Minister for Development, Strategies and International Trade for Sri Lanka. Thank you very much. We have the Director General for UNIDO, Lee Yong, right next. After we have Malgorzata Wadzinska, who's the Associate Director for Global Government Relations and Public Policy, Procter & Gamble, Poland. Thank you very much for joining us. We have Dr. Patrick Gomez, Secretary General for the Group of African, Caribbean and Pacific States. Thank you as well. We have Ratnakar Adhikari, Executive Director for the Enhanced Integrated Framework, WTO. Thank you. Gabor Zamboki, I hope I got that name right, CEO of Any Security Printing, here at home in Hungary. And we have Jaideep Prabhu, who's a professor at Cambridge Judge Business School for the UK. Now, let me just explain in about 20 seconds what everyone does, so that we get to understand, before we start off with His Excellency here, why we have a wide range of panel and people represented from different countries and different continents to guide us through trade working for the 99%. Honorable Malik oversees the Board of Investment for the Export Development Board, the Department of Import and Export Control, and the Mahapola Trust Fund as part of his cabinet duties. Previously, he was chairman or director of companies engaged in manufacture and export of ready-made garments, real estate development, and import or export. You have also played a role in expanding Sri Lanka's apparel sector, the leading source of export revenues. So you'll be creating perspective on that end. Mr. Lee Yong, his extensive career includes Vice Minister of Finance of China, has a leading role in the Chinese Central Bank for a decade. He also took measures to boost agriculture development and build up SMEs while promoting gender equality and reducing poverty. So you'll be guiding us through that. We have Mrs. Wadzinka, who has led government relations and public policy for EU markets since 2012, responsible for managing, shaping and leveraging the policy environment to be consistent with business ethics and for influencing public policies and legislation at regional, national and local levels. You've worked in Brussels helping influence legislation in EU accession countries, so we should be getting perspective as well. Right next, Dr. Gomez, elected Secretary General 2014. Previously served as Guyana's ambassador to Belgium and the EU, the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and the Food and Agriculture Organization. You've authored numerous development and social policy analysis publications, so you'll be guiding us through that. Right next, we have Dr. Adhikari. He leads the Enhanced Integrated Framework at the WTO, focused on trade for less developed countries. Of course, they've also been sidelined a lot and marginalized, so we'll be getting perspective. Previously, he led the South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment, and a senior advisor to Nepal's National Planning Commission, and a trade program specialist for the UNDP. Right next, Mr. Zamboki, CEO and General Manager of Any Security Printing Company since 2008, became Deputy Chairman 2014, served as a Deputy General Manager of Sales and Marketing at Alami Nyomda PLC, and the company produces Hungarian biometric passports, master and visa chip cards, election forms, and many other high-quality, high-level products with a security component. And their products stem from even outside Hungary. So we'll be getting perspective from that innovation and security and tech on the same. And finally, we have Professor Prabhu Jawaharlal Nehru Professor of India Business and Enterprise, as well as the Director of Center for Indian Global Business. His research focuses on international business, marketing, strategy, and innovation. So we'll try both of us to put the rest of the panelists on the hot seats in regards to that. Now, of course, for us to map out what the next couple of days look, or the next sessions, we have to track back. What exactly happened at the last World Export Development Forum? And that's where we bring in the Honorable Minister. At last year's WEDF, hosted by Sri Lanka, you outlined the urgency of a trade-led development vision. You mentioned the role of the export market. You opening up our services, manufacturing, and the young people. Of course, gender equality, we'll hear about it. But give us your sense on how practical the applicability of what stemmed from last year's WEDF has been over the year.
Yes. Firstly, I must once again emphasize that our government remains very clear that an outward-oriented strategy is the only path towards prosperity for our people. We cannot grow from a low middle income economy to an upper middle income economy without being more open to trade and investment to the outside world, and without aggressively promoting exports. We are forging multiple trade agreements currently with Singapore, China and India, and we'll soon explore several more such trade agreements. Our immediate goal for the next 3 to 5 years is to increase our exports to $20 billion. This is a very ambitious task, and in spite of many challenges, it is absolutely crucial that we achieve this task to stabilize and strengthen our economy and enrich our people. Of course, the biggest difficulty, the challenge that we have is to change the mindset of our people, not only the bureaucrats, but some politicians as well. Since the last World Export Development Forum in Sri Lanka, we have taken several initiatives. We have now a national trade policy approved by the Cabinet of Ministers. This, I believe, is a landmark achievement and is an important step in setting the way forward agenda for the country's outward orientation. The other is the national export strategy, which we mentioned at the last forum. With the support of ITC, our Export Development Board, together with the private sector, have prepared this strategy, and it's in the final stages of, it's in the final weeks of finalization. It identifies priority sectors and priority trade support functions with a plan of action for implementation in each of these, with timelines, targets, and responsible institutions. The steering committee will be appointed in the next few days, and we believe that this strategy will be in place by June 2018. The other effort since the WEDF is that we have embarked on a comprehensive innovation and entrepreneurial strategy with the help of the World Bank. Once launched, it will include with a range of specific measures to boost exporters' competitiveness and technology upgrading, support quality certification and higher standards, new product development and innovation. In this, our focus is mainly on SMEs and startups. We need more and more of them coming into the mainstream of exports. And for this, it really is innovation that will help them break in with new products into new markets. This is a key part of our effort to make trade truly inclusive. And finally, we have looked at the ease of doing business index. Currently, we are at 110, and it is our objective to get to 70 by 2020. And we have embarked on a series of practical measures to remove procedural and regulatory bottlenecks. We are now 8 task force working at improving 8 aspects of improving ease of doing business index. There are streamlined procedures being adopted with a lot of input from the private sector.
Right, many thanks for that. As we move on to the next panelist, we would like to catch up on what happened last week with the ACP Ministerial Committee. Dr. Gomez, you'll pick up that conversation. But just to the general viewers, immediately after this round of questioning, we'll have a few more questions, and then we'll open the floor to the audience. So whatever questions you might have, we'll have them from you during the third round of questioning. Now, Dr. Gomez, last week we had the ACP Ministerial meeting. Committee on Trade, they met in Brussels, and they touched largely on this focus of today, trade working for the 99%, or at least in retrospect. Help us understand what came out of that should be applicable even for our conversation today.
Thank you very much, George. Basically, when the ministers met last week, there are three key things that came out. First of all, we have to defend the multilateral system, the multilateral trading system, and overall, multilateralism and multilateral institutions have to be defended in this age. Because as you know from very powerful quarters, they want to disband or abolish or in fact deny. We've seen an example of what has happened to UNESCO. Now, the multilateral trading system means the way in which not only the 99, but all 100% have an equal voice. Member states must arrive at a consensus. So very strong political commitment must be given to defend multilateralism. Now more than ever we need it. The question of protectionism and building ghettos, building walls to make ghettos will not serve, certainly, the 1%. In fact, for over the 42 years in the African Caribbean Pacific group, we've defended not the 1%, sometimes I think it's a 0.5 of 1%. Right at the bottom, because what has happened, globalization has been mentioned, is the widening of the gap between the top and the bottom. Now, therefore, we call for special and differential treatment of developing countries, especially LDCs. And since 2005, again, our ministers repeated that the cotton four, those four countries in West Africa, Benin, etc., producing cotton, if we do want to move up the value chain, first of all, the subsidies that are being provided to cotton farmers in the developed countries, in the advanced industrial countries, have to be ended. 2005, we said it in Hong Kong, the WTO, and yet nothing has been done because there's resistance. That is why not only the 79 member states of the ACP, but joining with the European Union, 28, we're 107 as a single voice. We want to make sure special and differential treatment is maintained. I think the third aspect is we want to build from the bottom up. And I like what Minister said. The policy is important. We speak the primacy of policy. The policy must be such that you are going to allow and make room for inclusivity and mutual accountability on both sides. I think another dimension of policy is important, the regulatory mechanism. We cannot expect micro, small, medium enterprises to get up and to enhance their competitiveness if you have many, many regulations choking them. That is why I admire in the conference and the forum speaking about business and policymakers, political leadership in the legislative, the lawmaking, the regulatory mechanisms, how they're functioning. We've had a joint parliamentary assembly of the parliamentarians who come from across the 79 countries demanding now a greater say on the legislation that looks at what regulatory mechanism is there. Then, of course, I think we can build up from the bottom. We're seeing more and more successes there. What we learn, failures, of course, learn from the failures, but building up and having that cumulative impact is the only way the 1% is going to reverse what the 99% is doing. So I think that building of the masses and also seeing the way in which the policy environment must be conducive. We cannot give lip service. As we said with Director General, we want to walk the talk, and it's not business talking now, it's business acting. And the ACP is fully behind and supportive for action at the WTO. Thank you very much, George.
Fantastic. Thank you very much also for sticking within the time. 2 to 3 minutes is what we're giving every panelist. Thank you for that, Dr. Gomez. Time now to get a perspective from UNIDO. We've talked about, Dr. Gomez has mentioned about approaching things from the basics. Of course, the basics in context from what had earlier been with the different shifts globally, agriculture and agro-processing. Part of the value chain has been crucial in understanding it. So we have a lot of players in the conference here between today and tomorrow that are involved in it, but we'd like to understand what the United Nations and the Industrial Development Organization is doing to ensure cutting-edge approaches, knowing very well the next question we have will be in regards to a frugal economy and ensuring we don't spend as much and get as little over the years we are trying to pay back our grants and loans.
Thank you very much, George. United Nations Industrial Development Organization is one of the UN family member solely focusing on the industrial development to support our country's member states for industrial development. We all know the trade. When we talk about trade, if we're not mentioning the manufacturing industrialization, that will be something not quite well, because trade started also because with a strong foundation of manufacturing. When we talk about the 2030 development agenda, SDG Goal 9 is very clearly mentioned that inclusive, sustainable industrial development, infrastructure innovation. But here, industrial development is simply not just manufacturing. It's inclusiveness and sustainability is so important. Here, I just would like to mention we focus on the least developed countries' industrial development, but inclusiveness, sustainability, two important concepts. Inclusiveness means every people, every country, men, women, youth, can share the prosperity from the entrepreneurship, from manufacturing. And we support member countries develop industry, manufacturing, just to support them to build a capacity building for the trade. The agro business, agro industry is one of the strong pillars of our UNIDO operation. For instance, like country Ethiopia, Senegal, Ethiopia, they have a very big agriculture sector. Countries really depend on the agriculture sector. But food processing is one of the important areas we support them. The leather production, textile, all important from the agriculture. This is a transformation process of the country from the agrarian to industrial development. So during this process, we work together with the government. They should develop policies, strategy to support industrial development, and the private sector, which is so important. They create value, create a job, create women empowerment. Many things actually start there. So we develop a technology transfer program, workshop program to support them, invite the government to support them with appropriate policies, appropriate strategy to support them. So this is really a very important occasion for us to commit ourselves to support SME, support individual. We always mention the micro business actually start from there. I certainly just would like to stop here, and I will join the following discussion to introduce more about what our challenges facing new industrial revolution, facing the challenges of some of the globalization issue, and then UNIDO will play a kind of role to support a member state to create the trade connected to global value chain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, ordinarily, most people, when we come to conferences like this, the general sentiment is that conglomerates or UN bodies or these global agencies, they say things that are not relatable on ground. That has been the general sentiment, or things that are not applicable 1 year after or are not practical in implementation. Now, which brings me to Dr. Adhikari. You have a multi-donor program that is helping the world's 49 poorest countries. We need to hear the realities on ground. We've talked about intra-Africa trade at 12%, intra-Asia trade at 40%, meaning there's a large issue in terms of spending, but we still have the poorest countries separated and split between the two areas. So what are the realities on ground in terms of trying to work out this conversation?
Thank you very much for that question, George. What I would like to do is to focus, on two important issues that were raised this morning, and particularly by the President, Excellency President. He raised a very important issue of environment, and then Arantxa raised a very important point of agenda. So what I'm trying to do here is to, while responding to your question and talking about disparity, and then coming from an action-oriented organization, what we've done on the ground, I'll just give you an example of two of these important topics that would have bearing on our conversation in relation to making trade work for 99% of the total global population. So in relation to gender, I'll just give you a few examples of what we have done on the ground. I'll just give you the example of starting with Burkina Faso, where we have supported a mango project, a mango drying plant. What we did is to provide training to the workers and as well as to farmers on good agriculture practices, on various techniques of drying mango, and we also provided them with the mango drying facility, and also provided them training on modern sort of drying practices, right? So with the help of that, 1,020 jobs were created only in 2016, and with the help of that we were able to help them export their products into the global market and increase their export from 3.7 million in 2014 when the project started to 10.2 million in 2016, and it's a growth rate of 160%, and 40% of the total beneficiaries are women of that project. So that's actually one example that I wanted to give you. A second example is that of Rwanda, where we supported 2 cross-border market center bordering DRC on the south and Uganda on the northern part, where these market centers cater to the needs and priorities of 74% of the traders who are women, actually, right? And it provides a safe space for them to store their product and negotiate with their buyers, then have the banking facility where they could deposit their proceeds, have the craze for their children, where their children can play and rest when their mothers are trading. Those kind of facilities have been created, as a result of which they will be in a position to trade 5 days a week, as opposed to 1 day a week that they are engaged in trading activities, because of weather conditions and all that, because they have to trade in an open area. So this is the second example that I wanted to provide you in the context of gender. And the third example is Cambodia, a project that we've supported and implemented by none other than the co-host of this forum, International Trade Center, where they have trained 14 women entrepreneurs have been trained to advance their sort of capacity to produce and enhance the quality of their product and be able to break into international market, right? So they have been able to break into the international market, and a new 150 new buyers have signed contract, from European Union, US, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, as a result of which their export doubled in a matter of 3 years' time, and the income of weavers, almost 300 weavers, has increased by 74%. So these are the points relating to gender, the very much action-oriented point. And in relation to environment, just 2 quick examples that I want to provide you and then wrap up is the example of Mali, where the project that we have supported on Gum Arabic is a part of a Great Wall of Africa, a regional initiative which is aimed at halting the advancement of Sahara Desert towards the country, and as a result of which the beneficiaries have planted 10,000 hectares of land with acacia tree, which actually helps to prevent the movement of deserts well into the country, and also help them in poverty alleviation. So that's another sustainable land management practices, as well as the intergenerational equity that we are talking about in Mali. And finally, the example of Vanuatu, where we've supported a climate change mitigation measure, actually, whereby the cyclone palm that destroyed the seafront infrastructure in Port Vila has been restored. Actually, in March 2015, the cyclone palm destroyed it, and then in August we initiated this project. The project has completed now, and we have built a robust structure at the seafront, and we've also rebuilt the market center where women, traders, particularly called market mamas, they sell the handicraft, sell their handicraft product. So these are the action-oriented, but I'll come to other policy issues in the second round probably. Thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you. The only reason why we didn't stop you is because that's the reality on ground, but you've eaten up a minute of your next round, but thank you very much for that. Now, we heard from the opening remarks as well regarding whether do we have fiscal discipline or do we boost economic growth? And that brings us to our next point. And we'll hear a phrase called the frugal economy, Dr. Prabhu. This is one whereby, and you will correct me where I'm wrong, that is very applicable in the current situation we are globally. We have the United States, for example. They're setting up probably a large solar garden or a solar company to finance industries and to contribute to the national grid, of course, as they grow to a green economy. In Asian markets, we are seeing a lot of work happening with industries as well, a lot of money being pumped in. In Rwanda, where I'm from, and I'm sure most of you who are coming to Africa, in a few years, in about 4 to 5 years, most of you will be coming to Rwanda and then going to other countries. You can mark that because they're now expanding their airport to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. And most people would ask, Rwanda, we know Rwanda particularly because of the genocide of '94. They're such a small economy, 20 years, why would they be engaging hundreds of millions of dollars trying to work out such an ambitious project? So my question to you is, this particular frugal economy and trying not to spend as much but expecting the bulk of the returns, who is it applicable to and what has been the case?
Thank you, George. Great question. So what is the frugal economy about, and what is frugal innovation about? Really, it's about doing more and better with less resources for more people. And if we look around the world, we see something of a frugal innovation revolution happening, which has both demand side and supply side aspects. So if you look on the demand side, the World Bank estimates that there are roughly 3 billion people, more or less half the world's population, that live on something like $10 a day PPP. Most of these people are outside the formal economy and face unmet needs in very basic areas like financial services, access to clean energy, access to good quality education, healthcare, and so forth. Now, this is a potentially very large untapped market opportunity. So far, we have seen very few market-based solutions for this very large market. But achieving that, fulfilling that market potential, which is there, requires these kinds of affordable, sustainable solutions. And the good news is that on the supply side, we now see that it's increasingly possible for small teams or startups to be able to deliver these kinds of affordable, sustainable solutions to meet market needs in these markets. Now, this is partly because of access to ubiquitous tools and technologies. Small teams can now do what only big companies or the government could do 10 or 15 years ago. They have access to tools to get information on markets. They have tools to test and prototype solutions, not just software, but also increasingly hardware solutions, and then to market these, not just locally, but potentially globally. If you solve a local problem in one country, there are markets elsewhere for that. The problem that these startups often face, though, is of scaling. And this is where governments can help. So governments can help the startups scale domestically, as the Minister from Sri Lanka was saying, by reducing red tape, reducing regulatory burden, making it easier to do business. Also, they can help by matchmaking, bringing these SMEs and MSMEs into the value chain of large companies, bringing them in. And also through their own procurement, which is often an uneven playing field between large and small. You were mentioning multinationals, which are preferred often over local smaller companies. So the governments can help domestically, but they can also help where trade is concerned, because the risk is very great for small and medium-sized enterprises when they cross borders. And here governments can help. For instance, they can use their embassies and consulates to provide access to new markets, information, certain types of financing, networks, and so on. But most importantly, they can reduce protectionist barriers. So I think there are many things, there are many opportunities here for frugal innovation to involve small and medium-sized companies to meet the needs of people left out of the formal economy, of the global economy. But governments can play a role, and institutions like various UN institutions and the ITC can play an important role.
And luckily, thank you, luckily we have Ms. Wadzinska here who can provide perspective as well. Before we go to a business, I know we'll get the Hungarian perspective of business from that end with any printing company. But what has been your role or your view on what is being discussed in terms of the relationship and the catalysis between governments and businesses? Now we see a lot of detachment. Probably we'll have a lot of conversations from here that would make great government policies if they were implemented. But implementing and discussing about it, they're almost always miles apart.
Yes, thank you for inviting P&G to contribute to this very important discussion. And indeed, I have examples to share, and because we are here in Hungary, I'm happy to reach for examples actually from here, which are close to my daily work, of excellent cooperation between company and the government, because indeed companies can do great things, government can do great things, but only together the synergy is really, and we have the best of the two worlds. So the example in Hungary is as such that we have a big investments and a large presence here in Hungary, and Hungarian government has signed strategic partnership agreement with us, and within this partnership specifically it's encouraging us to help the economic policy to develop in the right direction to increase competitiveness of Hungary. There is a special chapter of cooperation with SMEs and small suppliers. There is also a chapter on dual education. So as part of it, we have a very close collaboration dialogue on the policies. Every 6 months we can come and talk. If there is any issue, we can come and talk. We have just opened up the classes of vocational dual education around one of our plants, and we have classes where the students are learning how to operate cutting-edge technology, so they increase their skills not only to become potentially employees of P&G, but also for the market, because the theoretical part is happening at the school and practical education is happening at the newly built workshops that when they come 2 or 3 times in a week to really practice and having access to knowledge and to those cutting-edge equipment. Another example of excellent cooperation, and this is something that I would highly recommend to, and it will be great to see everywhere, is an example of from Poland, where the government is seeing this opportunity that multinational big companies can really help the SMEs and startups to provide a springboard to really get into the global chain and to be able to scale their projects. So they are creating platforms. We have a project start in Poland, and one of the chapters, Startup Spark, is where P&G has been invited by the governmental agency to become a founding member. Other companies join, and this agency is matching SMEs and business, large businesses. Large businesses are giving the business cases, the challenges that we have, and they matching with startups which can bring the solutions in the digital area. And what is really important is not only to create a physical space and this recruitment, but also the facilitation and people who dedicate their time to translate the language between big companies and startups, because very often even this is a communication barrier where the startups do not understand how the big companies function, and big companies very often would not understand the startups. There is also public funding provided for the startups who win the context to enter with the best solutions for the business. So this is fantastic opportunity. We have already, as we speak, 3 of them working on business cases. One of them has been already scaled up and it's globally applied, and 2 of them have a big potential to be scaled up. So there is lots of opportunities for dialogue and for these platforms, business, small startups and big business together.
Let me just ask you a follow-up question, because you talked about startups not understanding government policy or not understanding the practicality of business. Are they involved in the meeting when you get into a room with government? So when you're trying to deliberate, are the startups involved, or is it a matter of you meet with the governments and then you transfer the information to the startups later? What has been the case?
Of course, establishing a platform, it starts with dialogue between the business and us, but at the end, everybody gets together, and we have facilitators who are funded by the projects to be dedicated to working together. So at the end, we're working together. So there is governmental agency, it's startup, it's big business, there are lectures, there is coaching, mentoring over the entire life of the project.
Right, thank you. Let's move on to our last panelist before we get into the second round. To get perspective from a major Hungarian company, any security printing. Now, we had a joke yesterday. Because of the size of Hungary, we were saying that if you drive too quickly, you might leave the country and do not know that you're here. But the thing about Hungary is that they've won numerous accolades, and they've had a lot of think tanks come from here, and has been the genesis of a lot of innovation, Hungary itself. So we'd like to get perspective. Of course, your business has gone decades, and you understand where it started, and you've tried to keep up, or if not outpace, the current trends in society. So just give us your perspective from an innovation point, how you think times have changed, and how you've been able to adjust, which we know is almost very expensive or very tasking on the workforce, adjusting to the current development in society.
Thank you. So we have a quite long history. From the establishing moment of this company, it was international, because we've been established in 1851, and we were the printer of the Austro-Hungarian kingdom. So we started there. When speaking about trade, at least three elements are crucial: people, product or service, and the business. The business is money and the place. So in these three major elements, we are present in every cases, which means that you need to identify the people, you need to identify the product, and you need to identify the business process itself. So we are acting on these three fields. What is very important is that, yeah, Hungary is not too big, but creativity and the dynamics of the country is huge. What we are speaking about is processes, identification of people, products and services, and the businesses, and the know-how transfer. This is the major issue. We are developing different type of technologies, IT solutions and so on, and during our businesses we are transferring the know-how to the markets. So that's why we are present in Africa, in several countries, since 12 years or more, where we are delivering the highly developed products, and we are helping the local companies to create jobs, to create technologies, and with these technologies they can identify the major elements of the trade. This is the philosophy of the country. And thanks God we have a South Opening program from Hungary, launched by the government. However, we started earlier than this program has been launched, but we are very happy with that. And on the other hand, let me tell something about the relationship between Hungary and African countries. That there is a country we started 3 years ago, and it's very interesting that we were studying the same university in Budapest with a gentleman who is actually a very, very highly positioned person. So that's why, and on the other hand, we are almost in the same time zone. So this is very important on one hand. On the other hand, what is very important, we are transferring the know-how, the latest technologies, and we are creating jobs. So that's very important, because if we want to produce everything in Hungary, the whole entire country, which is 93,000 square kilometers, it's not enough.
Please just stay with the microphone. We'll come to Dr. Gomez next with the WTO ministerial and what's happening to embed that. But let me just follow up on that. in the African context, we had this conversation the whole of this year and last year about the fourth industrial revolution. Now that conversation was picked up by different continents, obviously. But so you've obviously had a hand, and you have a comparative advantage to other companies that would try now to fit into the fourth industrial revolution. And in the African context and a lot of these developing economies, we missed the first, second, and third industrial revolution. So what is the case now? How are we ever going to catch up with such innovation, if you talk about it?
Well, just one thing is that if you think about the telecommunication, in Africa you can find the very, very highly developed mobile telecommunication. Even we have in Europe some countries where we don't have the same, on one hand. On the other hand, in a lot of African countries you can find those people who are very, very highly educated. They were learning in Cambridge, in Amsterdam, in somewhere. And you have a lot of young people who has the willingness to learn. They absorb the new knowledge like the sponge. So we like it very much, and we are inviting them to learn here. We are training the trainers, and afterwards we are helping the trainers to act on site. And yes, there is a huge need for the new technologies, what we see now, because the payment systems, identification of the people during this migrant time, it's very important. And every country would like to show their security, their stability, and if they have such kind of tools, in this case, they can refer to the international standards, and that's what we can bring for them. And it's a huge cooperation. I like it very much.
All right, perfect. Thank you. For our next round, before we get to, we'll have 3 questions. Before we get to the audience, let's just focus on a section of the community or the traders that has been marginalized. Women entrepreneurs. Now, Cambodia has been a best practice where we're seeing a lot of development happening from the government level, but we still see a lot of informal trade and in terms of ensuring that we have a straight line of the ecosystem, it has not been clear yet, for example. So let's come to Dr. Gomez. We have the WTO ministerial, and we intend to have the draft gender and trade declaration adopted during that upcoming WTO ministerial meeting. What do we anticipate will come out in regards to women entrepreneurs and boosting that part of the economy?
A direct focus on women entrepreneurs may not emerge, but we are hopeful that at least the question of the fishing subsidies, eliminating those harmful fishing subsidies, are very necessary. We would also like to see that the public stock holding of food security for countries will be guaranteed. You see, in WTO, the battle lines are being drawn between the small, advanced industrialized countries, and we're very happy that the European Union, as a large economy, is in collaboration with the ACP group, the 79, as I say, and the 28. But also there are larger numbers, the G90, and also, of course, the large group of the small and vulnerable economies. The question of women will be, of course, important to link gender and development on several aspects. If we want to remove fishing subsidies, the fisher folk are female. The fisher folk, but also the processing of fishing products, the tuna canning that is taking place in Papua New Guinea, that has, of course, been enhanced and increased and making great strides into the European market, need to ensure that women in the agro-processing sector are fully respected, that their rights are there, but also they must have access as possibilities for financing to form their own agro-processing businesses. So the gender and trade declaration as an output of the WTO discussions in Buenos Aires will be very helpful. It must be part of a wider concern about gender equality. That's why we are working again, the ACP, with the European Union and the UN, and launched a major initiative now on gender, and looking at sexual abuse and violence on various levels. And that would be a big program with several stakeholders with 500 million that was launched in the UN just at the last General Assembly, so that the rights of women have to be respected, because women will be contributing, and they do contribute. I come from the Caribbean and Guyana, and we speak in Jamaica of a famous study done, My Mother Who Fathered Me. The mother, the role of the mother in the household, the way in which she looked after the education. As you say, and we know it very well, you educate a whole society when you educate women. So more and more, that is why I brought back the role for the legislature and for the regulatory mechanisms. The law must be such that it provides access for women to finance in their own right, and also the regulations, the type of occupational safety health where there's processing. It's just not the numbers being increased, but within it, how women's rights are respected, and therefore gender equality in all its aspects can be respected. We hope that will come to the fore, both on the fishing subsidies, but also in the whole area of food security.
Right, and hopefully we'll also have more women in panels such as this.
Thank you very much.
Right, Ms. Wodzinska, the irony is, it would be very ironical if I wouldn't ask you about scaling up as a woman in the workforce. Just help us understand your perspective as well, and what you think is being left out in the conversations.
Yes, that's an important question indeed, and we truly believe that women equality is not just a moral obligation, but this is really a business opportunity. I think everybody sees that. We have early experience from 1976 from states where P&G has headquarters, where we started to do intentional hiring and training for women, and we've seen from that experience that those businesses where women were owning them were delivering consistently better results and better performance. We started to help them with the workshops. We're bringing women as part of the Ohio River Valley Business Development Program in Cincinnati for 12 weeks, very intensive training together with the NGO We Connect. And we brought business leaders to help them to develop leadership skills, to really be successful in business. And we have brought this up as of 2015 globally. And we are really intentional right now to really provide opportunities for women. One thing that we have found as a barrier is identification of especially in some countries in Africa, for example, women-owned businesses. We really would like to be able to invite them and for our summits, for our trainings, and to look for businesses with them, but we are finding sometimes difficulties in identifying. I think so help of the government with definition and with some registers with business-owned, with women-owned businesses would be very helpful for us, because we really see this as a business-building opportunity. For P&G, this is very clear, because P&G produces products which are for women. Most of those products, like Pampers, Always, and other detergents, are purchased by women. So these insights in understanding how important the reflection of women in supply chain we know this very well. And we really believe in equality. We walk the talk as P&G as well, because we also strive for equality, and we have very good results.
Right, thank you very much. Let's get the minister's point of view. We'd like to understand what governments are doing, because the government is represented here. In other countries, we're talking about 75% informal trade, and the bulk of that 75% is run by women, but there's no recognition on the same. From a Sri Lanka perspective, what is that?
Yes, no, I must say that we have just brought in legislation to ensure that at least 25% of women, 25% of the women are represented in the local councils. So we also intend taking it to the national parliament as well. So we hope to have 30% representation of women in parliament as well. So with this, we believe that we can empower the women more. But in Sri Lanka, we find that most of the women, particularly those who are educated, are professionals, lawyers, doctors, and accountants. We have a few women who are in business as well. While we are encouraging more women to get into business, there seems to be some kind of a reluctance to enter the trading practices. But so most of the women are in the professional sectors and very well represented. But having said that, we are encouraging the businesswomen to get into business. We are giving them, we are recognizing their efforts and rewarding them at our annual export awards and so on. Yet I find that we don't have enough women coming forward for business.
Right, absolutely perfect. Thank you very much to our panelists. We'd like to open the floor to the audience. Ambassador Yvette, we know there might be a question as well, but would love to hear your input and pose a question to the panelists. But let me just open the floor, maybe to follow up on that conversation. I mentioned earlier about Rwanda and how they've managed to recover 20 years, just 20 years after the genocide that killed almost the entire population. But right now they have 64% representation of women in parliament. The main reason is because they say that women do the things that men talk about. And it's unfortunate for us as men because we really talk about a lot and we need to apply, and that's why we need the women as well in society. So when you talk about women entrepreneurs, we hope we'll have some questions as well from you in regards to applicability of that in your different businesses. So the floor is now open to the audience. If you have any question, just raise your hand, and when we come to you, please say your name, organization, and who you'd like to address the question to. We have two questions there, one in front and one there. We could start there.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Honorable Gifty Clenham. I'm from Ghana and the Chief Executive Officer of Ghana Export Promotion Authority. My question goes to UNIDO. Ghana is predominantly an agricultural economy, and we have signed on to the Economic Partnership Agreement. Over the years, we've been exporting predominantly our raw agro products. This time around that we've signed on to the EU, the vision has to change. And we are saying that we want to export a value-added product. How does UNIDO come in to support us in all phase of the value addition to enable us to export what we have added value instead of just exporting the raw products? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's take another question, please. Yes?
Yes, I wanted to make some comments. Can I do it now?
You have 1 minute as well.
Oh, okay, let me try. Let me thank, I think, ITC and the government of Hungary for inviting me to take part here. I'm the ambassador of Sierra Leone in Geneva and representing Sierra Leone in the World Trade Organization elsewhere. Now, why I thought I needed to come in at this point is that we're talking about the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. We are talking about which promises that no one should be left behind. We are looking at the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, which says that trade is an engine for development. And I come from Sierra Leone, a least developed country. And it is interesting because everybody pays lip service that we have, the least developed countries have to be given attention, we need to bring them up. We have 14 years left of the Sustainable Development Agenda. But apart from that lip service, when you split it, when you get into action, it's not always obvious that the actions that are taken at the multilateral level, sometimes at WTO, are going to make sure that the LDCs can have the full benefit from trade. I say this because I think the points were raised here about about what is happening, about special and differential treatment, which everybody talks about it, but it's not going to have much progress for MC11. We talk about agricultural subsidy, it's not going to feature. These are the important elements for LDCs, which will help them to actually bring us up, because my country, for instance, is an LDC, but is very rich in natural resources. And if we're not going to have all these whatever given to us, we're never going to make it. And I'm saying this because we have to look at the roots, the important things that would make us actually benefit. We do have, let me just say now, just to be provocative, we do have some of the concessions that are given to LDCs. But can they take full advantage of it? No. We have market access, but do we have the infrastructure required to be able to benefit fully from that market access? No. So one thing which I want to bring into the discussion is the importance of infrastructure. Because if we do not have the right infrastructure, we cannot benefit from whatever concessions are given to us. Just our last point here about gender. I co-chair the Gender Impact Group on the Gender Champions, together with Lanka, the Executive Secretary of ITC. Gender is important. We have to make sure that we target gender elements when we talk about improvements of trade, because we know that in many areas where women are present, they do not have access to the sort of facilities they need to make the impact which we are asking. If for some countries, if you look at MSMEs, a lot of it, a large percentage are women. So when you sort of differentiate, you do not give them the opportunity, you're also denying women the opportunity. So I'm just saying that we are hoping through the declaration that will give attention, will benefit from good examples, and will be able to move the women agenda forward. But please let us put our thoughts together to see how do we make that difference for the least developed countries so that they will not be left behind. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a question at the back.
Thank you. My name is Hala Gidami. I'm from Egypt. I'm the Executive Director for Foreign Trade Training Center. FTC is under the umbrella of the Egyptian Export Authority Development, EDA. I just want to share our experience for our entrepreneurs, and also I have a request. Right. So our experience is that we adopt as a training center, we adopt all ITC market access tools and supply chain training programs, packing and packaging programs too. We deliver this training programs to our entrepreneurs. Of course, it is translated into our national language and Arabized. Also, a very important thing is because in the development countries, it's not only the knowledge that is needed, it's the funds. So also we had the arm of the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation. They have joined us with ITC training programs. They fund delivering our training program to our youth, newly graduate youth, with the aim of job creation. So this became a very powerful training program that we deliver in cooperation with ITC and ITFC. What we lack in our training center is the programs specialized for the gender, the women. And this is my request, and this is actually my aim of being here, trying to see how we can make it for she trade in Egypt. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll pose that question for she trades in Egypt.
Okay. Another Egypt. This is Yamna El-Sharidi. I'm the president of Businesswomen of Egypt, and I would like to speak from the civil society aspect because, as you said, there is not in Sri Lanka businesswomen showing up. On the contrary, I think when you get into cooperation between the platform of civil society, of NGOs or businesswomen associations, they tend to cooperate positively and actively to the market and to the society and to the economy of the country. So let me add some of the few things I heard today, and it's really key to our success, because sometimes we miss what the SMEs need. And it's mainly technology transfer to most of the developing countries to help access markets, because when you come to buying and selling, no one will buy a product because it's from a developing country or because it's from a woman-made company. It has to be competitive, and it has the ability to access international markets with international standards. And you will not find easy any government institution or any institute that would really teach women how to do business or small business from a developing country to be able to compete internationally without knowing the technology of packaging, technology of manufacturing, of sustaining the product. And this is where many of the functions that we need from ITC and from the UNIDO to help really upgrade the existing MSMEs, not the micro level, the small and medium level that are able to employ people and to hire and be effective in the economy development and the GDP. Women in business have a lot to offer, especially to their families, quality of education, of health, and contribute to the whole family. I love the saying of the mother who fathered me, which is the case in most of in our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're seeing one question. So I'm guessing that question was for UNIDO as well? It was for UNIDO? Your question?
Thank you.
Your question was for UNIDO? Right. The last question, please.
Thank you. My name is Marcos Vaiana from ITC. My question is for Professor Jaideep Prabhu. We talk a lot about the trade for the 99%, and a lot of times we focus on the North-South trade, but there's also, of course, a dimension of trading between the 99%. So in your line of work and research, what have you seen in terms of knowledge exchange between developing countries in the area of frugal innovation, and what can practitioners such as us and other development agencies and governments learn from those exchanges? How can we make them better? And what suggestions you may have for agencies such as ours to be able to foster that exchange between the 99%. Thank you.
Thank you. We have about 15 minutes before we are done, so if we're done with these 5 questions, we could just take a few more from the audience. But let's start off with the UNIDO. There was the question regarding Ghana over the years, the first question, and value-added products, how exactly UNIDO comes.
Thank you very much, George. I really appreciate the question to me. I think that I visited Ghana 2 years ago. Ghana is an important country for us to provide our technical assistance, also the UNIDO project to Ghana. I just would like to mention one of the examples. Actually, UNIDO play a kind of role to support trader capacity building and also support SME, especially private sector. I visit Ghana Industrial Park. If you have ever been there, you will see that it's a really encouraging industrial park. It was been created 15 years ago. And I visited one company called Niche Cocoa. This company actually processing cocoa bean. We all know Ghana is a country producing large quantity of the cocoa bean. But before they export the raw cocoa bean to other countries, other markets. But now, because one company called Niche Cocoa, it's a private company, they try to connect it to value chain, connect to the different market, Asia, Europe, and North America. You need to help them to build one important laboratory and support them with equipment to test the products they produce. And we train the technician. And after this laboratory being established, they produce 3 kinds of products from the cocoa bean: cocoa butter, cocoa oil, cocoa powder. And those 3 kinds of products all can be exported to Europe, export to Asia and North America. Why? They can connect it to global market because of this laboratory, and because of the equipment we supported, because of the technicians can produce the certificate for all the products they produced. This is one of the example. I believe that company is still promising. They asked us to provide another support, help them to produce final products from the cocoa bean, which is chocolate. I believe one day they will export chocolate to Switzerland or maybe somewhere else. But we have numerous projects in Ghana, but I don't want to touch upon details. I have another example. I really appreciate Madame from Egypt. You mentioned about the importance of women training, job creation. We have very extensive program in Egypt. I just would like to say Egypt received almost just one of the largest number of projects from UNIDO. We, including vocational training, we support the government because you establish a new ministry of vocational training. We support them, and including training of the women. And one of the example, UNIDO is supporting women entrepreneurship as our RTPO office in Bahrain. For 17 years, 18 years, this office focused on the training of the women entrepreneurship. And now we had a global entrepreneurship summit supported by the government. I attended 2 years ago, and we visited those incubation center, women entrepreneurship training programs. Really amazing. You know how many women entrepreneurs actually being successful there. I visited 4 companies run by women. They received the training from this office. More than 50 countries from Asia, from the LAC region, from Africa, from Europe, those women coming to this ITPO office for training programs. So last year we celebrated 50 years anniversary. We invited quite a number of women entrepreneurs trained through this ITPO office and give them a award. And we invite Royal Highness from Bahrain to give them an award. So there are numerous such kind of cases supporting women. Look at the Ethiopia, industrial park there created through the FDI coming to the country. But every company you visit, you will see large number of the women working there. You know how much percentage is close to 70% of the workers there women. So this is one of the policy checking points when we approve the project. So we will have a more such kind of program in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't want to occupy too much of time. Thank you.
So 2 questions have been tackled. Ms. Arancha, we would really love to have your word because something was mentioned about she trades in Egypt and countries such as Egypt. Maybe after the question is answered, we could come to you to give perspective on the same. The question was asked to WTO about market access in a place where we have an abundance of resources and commodities. Maybe you'd want to take that? Yes.
Thank you. You know, market access as such is not a major problem for LDCs. I mean, of course, this might be a problem for others, but you know, when we're talking about market access, many of the countries have provided duty-free, quota-free market access to LDCs. The problem lies in some of the non-tariff barriers, including rules of origin. These are the issues that, and a standard-related barrier, these are the issues that we are trying to tackle in a very, limited way, right? And whatever success that we've been able to achieve are only incremental in the sense that, we cannot definitely, with the limited resources that we have, will be in a position to create transformational change. So let's bear that in mind. So, but in relation to the small contribution and in linking this to the LDC issues, as Ambassador Stevens raised, And in linking this again to a gap that you mentioned, in between, what we say and what we do, and this is quite important for us to understand. In the present context, we are talking about Sustainable Development Goals. We're talking about Istanbul Program of Action, Addis Ababa Action Agenda, where trade is highlighted as an important component of the development sort of paradigm, right? But when we are talking about the resources, in terms of Goal 8 of the Sustainable Development Goal, which talks about particularly Target 8A, to be even more specific, talks about increasing the aid for trade resources to developing countries, in particular to LDCs through enhanced integrated framework. We have mentioned there. But in terms of the resource that we've received, it is almost 1/3 of what we received in 2007. And the demand from LDCs to provide support for infrastructure project, as Ambassador Stevens rightly pointed out, is huge. There's a demand for providing support on institution building. There's a demand for providing support on human capital. There's a demand for providing support on enhancing their technological capability so that they are able to trade better. Also make use of e-commerce opportunities and all these opportunities. But the resources that we have is very, very limited. And with this resource, it will be very, very difficult for us to achieve Goal 17, Target 11 of Sustainable Development Goal, which talks of doubling the share of LDC's trade. And this is completely beyond, the reach of one organization to do it, but we feel that we have a moral obligation to do it. In order to fulfill that moral obligation, we need to be provided with adequate resources so that we can fulfill our commitment. So that's the angle that I wanted to take in this context. Right. So and the other question of disparity that you mentioned, this is actually the disparity between one continent and the other. But if you look at Asia, you mentioned about Asia having 40% intracontinental trade, right? But within Asia, you have pockets of poverty within Asia, or pockets of unsuccessful examples in Asia. South Asia, where I come from, and where the minister, honorable minister, also come from, has only 5% intra-regional trade share. I mean, this is not something to comfort you, but this is the kind of beginning that we have. But in relation to the difference between Africa and Asia, is that those 4 elements that I highlighted earlier, the element of infrastructure, institution, human capital, and technology, are quite important in the context of understanding the changes, understanding the disparity. And I'm sure with the example of Rwanda, Ethiopia, Ghana, Egypt, and others that that were discussed this morning, I think Africa is catching up, and catching up very fast.
Right. Absolutely fantastic. Professor Prabhu, there's a question that was asked. We're talking about trade for the 99%, but what about trade within the 99%?
That was a great question, and I think good ideas spread, and they spread from within areas that have similar problems and solutions. So let me just give you some examples of that kind of south-south spreading of good ideas in the frugal context. And this links to the question about gender, microfinance. Microfinance is a good example of frugal innovation, bottom-up, grassroots, which is centrally around a problem that many people in low-income communities face of access to credit, and it has women at the heart of it. And it is an ingenious solution to a problem of how you bring capital to communities that are remote, how you bring financial services to reach that last mile, which is an expensive proposition, by actually involving the beneficiaries in the solution. So you create a group of women who form a self-help group, a joint liability group, and they pool their resources and they act as collateral for loans, which then help them to become entrepreneurial. It empowers them not only financially, but to the minister from Sri Lanka's point, it also provides psychological and social support. And I think that model, having started in maybe a country like Bangladesh, has spread globally. It's spread across continents. You see this in Africa, you see this in Latin America. So there's clearly that kind of spreading of ideas which can happen through trade. Now, there's the reverse process of a very interesting solution in Africa that has spread elsewhere, M-Pesa, or mobile payments, which started in Kenya. Actually, the idea came from people in informal communities, in urban slums, and Vodafone's subsidiary was actually inspired by that to come up with a formal solution. That then spread to other African countries. You have that now in Asian countries, Afghanistan and Bangladesh and so on. And a final example actually was from just yesterday, speaking to one of the young entrepreneurs here from Zimbabwe, close to your part of the world. Pascal Nyasha was his name. And he was talking about a solution he has developed for farmers in Zimbabwe, a digital platform, which he bootstrapped. He has a bakery and he cross-funded himself his own startup, working with locals to create this digital platform, working with farmers' unions to get information and having enumerators on the ground who collect information on prices of crops to help farmers. Now that he has done this in Zimbabwe, he can move to Zambia and so on. And he's looking. So I think there's a huge opportunity for South-South cooperation and trade here, where grassroots ideas can spread. But of course, governments and institutions like the ITC can help through training, through giving information, through giving support, and helping that cross-fertilization process.
Perfect, thank you. You mentioned Kenya. Back to the point from Unido about Ghana and the cocoa. We have the soaps that are in the hotels here. They're made from, the extract is from Kenya, actually. So it's all the way in Hungary, so that's definitely a good sign of the trade happening. So when you go back to your rooms, just check the soap. It's written right there on the soap, from Kenya. So final point has to do with Arantxa before we sign up this session. A question was asked about SheTrades, what SheTrades is doing for Egypt, and what it's doing for countries such as Egypt.
So first let me tell you that SheTrades is not ITC's SheTrades. SheTrades is a movement. It's action from actors all across the spectrum, from governments to business, to academics, to civil society, with three ingredients. One is a very concrete goal, connecting 1 million women to markets by 2020. Frankly, 1 million is very modest because there is 1 billion women disconnected from markets. But we want to start somewhere and we want to put names to this million women. Good news, we are already 800,000 and we launched this at the beginning of the year. So it shows the initiative is picking up. Again, bad news is that we've got a hell of a way to go to get to the 1 billion. Second is 7 areas of work. Some of them have been mentioned by the panel. Public procurement, private procurement. We heard this from Margorzata. We heard this from the professor. It's about putting more women into value chains. It's about getting better gender disaggregated data, which we don't have. It's about more targeted networking and support for women entrepreneurs. So 7 areas of work, and one tool that you can all use whether you are anywhere in the world. It's an app. You can download it, shetrades.com. Download it, Android, any other system. It's in English. It's been made into Spanish and into French. The purpose of which is to help women connect. We heard from Procter & Gamble, very often multinationals would like to buy from women suppliers and they just don't know where they are. In the 21st century, this should not be an issue. So we've decided to launch this SheTrades platform in which women can register. They can tell us, it's some sort of Facebook for women entrepreneurs. You can tell us where you are, in which sector of the economy, in which product, in which service. You can help through that with those that would like to buy from you. What we are doing is launching SheTrades in a number of countries. We've done this in Nigeria, we've done this in Rwanda, in Kenya, in Pakistan. We have done this in Indonesia, but over and above the national chapters, which require mobilization of local actors. This is not about ITC going there and having a show. It's about mobilizing local actors, banks that they lend to women, businesses that they buy from women, governments that they understand and change policies. This is, again, what we have done in these countries. Over and above the individual countries, we are also working at creating regional hubs, regional, let's say, initiatives that will help us cross-fertilize this movement. We are in discussions with a number of partners to build the regional hubs. We are in discussions with a large number of businesses to announce partnerships. This will be probably more towards the end of the year or beginning of the year next year in Davos. But we certainly, you can all, whether you are in Egypt, whether you are in Zimbabwe, whether you are in Afghanistan, or whether you are anywhere in the world, including Hungary, you can count on She Trades to be your tool to help women connect to international trade.
Fantastic, thank you. Unfortunately or fortunately for those who want to have coffee, we can't conclude everything within 1.5 hours, but of course it sets context and precedent for the rest of the sessions that are set to happen. We have a session right after the coffee break, so we'll engage a lot more on some issues that are pertinent to business and business to business. I'd like to thank the panelists. His Excellency Mr. Malik Samara Wikrama, Minister for Development Strategies and International Trade for Sri Lanka. Thank you very much. Right. Mr. Lee Yong, Director General at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Thank you very much. Ms. Malgorzata Wadzinska, Associate Director, Global Government Relations and Public Policy, Europe, and Procter & Gamble in Poland. Thank you very much. Next we have Dr. Patrick Gomez, Secretary General for the Secretariat of the ACP, that's the Africa, Caribbean and Pacific Group of States. Thank you. Mr. Ratnakar Adhikari, Executive Director of the Enhanced Integrated Framework for WTO. Thank you. Mr. Gabor Zamboki, CEO and General Manager, Any Security Printing, Hungary. Thank you for giving perspective. And Professor Jaideep Prabhu, Cambridge Judge Business School, University of Cambridge. Thank you as well. And of course, thank you to ITC Executive Sec, Arantxa Gonzalez, as always, and the Ambassador, Stevens from Sierra Leone, for giving us your perspective and questions, and of course the questions from the rest of the audience. We really do appreciate it. I've been your host, George Ndirango. Be sure to tweet as much as possible as we continue. We'd like to get things trending, so WEDF17 is the hashtag. Thank you very much. We'll keep the conversation going after this.
We would also like to thank for all of our panelists for kicking off this conference with a really important topic and an interesting discussion.
Also, we would like to draw your attention on the fact that an important component of this forum is the business-to-business meetings. This began yesterday and will continue today starting at 11:30 in the Bartok room.
We will now have a short coffee break. We will be starting our next session here approximately at 12 p.m. But before that, we would like to ask everybody on the stage for the group photo now. Thank you very much. Please proceed to the stage.